Welcome to Syntax. Today we got an awesome show for you. It's a potluck episode. This is where you submit the questions. We will attempt to answer them for you. Keep those potluck questions coming. If there's something you'd like us to answer on one of these episodes, or often we get ideas for entire shows on that, just go to syntax.fm. Top right-hand corner, there's a button you can click on that you can submit a potluck question. We really appreciate them. And some really good questions today. We're going to be talking about, can you use React server components if your backend is not in JavaScript? Some ideas around accessibility, some stuff on Cloudflare, and a whole bunch of interesting stuff coming on up. My name is Wes Boss. I'm a developer from Canada. With me, as always, is Scott. How you doing today, Scott?
Hey, I'm doing good. Some context here. We're recording this right after coming back from React Miami, so you could imagine we're both a lagging a little hard here. It was quite the event. We were there for almost a whole week, just whole team working, whole team putting together a show. And so thank you to everybody who came out and watched us at React Miami. It was a lot of fun. And hey, I got to give a special shout out to the Codium folks. You know, we had them on the show once, but man, they hooked up my son with a tub of Legos while he was waiting for Syntax Live to start. And he has been going nuts over those Legos. And that was just a really super cool thing to do. So shout out to Codium for that. And it's also a great tool. So on top of that. But before we get going, this episode is brought to you by Sentry. Sentry is the perfect place to track not only your errors, but also your performance. We use this so heavily to improve the performance on Syntax, whether that is through slow database queries, slow page loads. And one of the coolest things about it is they give you a user misery score, which is, basically how much a page is hit versus how slow it is. That way you can actually track which of your pages get the most amount of traffic and are the slowest, so that you know which pages to focus on first. And I'm noticing our performance scores have dropped a little bit. So that means I need to go take another look at that and figure out what's going on there. But a lot of really, really great stats there that you can keep track over time and see how your application's performing, attach it to releases, and so much more. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Sign up today, again, 2 months for free. Let's get into it with the first potluck question here from Binary Bob. In my career, I have found that hard work is always rewarded with more hard work. I feel that's funny. I think I've heard that before. I feel I get punished by being efficient and completing my work early for the sprint. What is your experience with this, and any tips? Should I just lie and say I'm not done yet? I'm personally just like a little cooldown period before I start my next sprint. Binary Bob, here's some ideas. It depends on what your organization wants to see. Sometimes certain organizations give less work in the hopes that you'll finish it early and then work on things that are potentially slightly outside of your purview. That way you can, flex a little bit in that time and show that you are a valuable member of the team by doing more than what they ask. But that's not always the case, and you shouldn't necessarily always feel like you have to do that to meet your expectations as an employee. But sometimes here as well, you can take the time, and I've done this myself, when you finished working on a project, to explore code things in a way that is, one, still productive, but two, maybe not necessarily related to the project. I remember I was working on a bunch of client Drupal and WordPress sites, and what I would do once I finished those sites, inevitably a month ahead of time, because I was fairly fast at those sites at that point, I would finish them way early. And you know what I would do? I would either spend extra time on things that would juice up the experience. So I would make the admin sections of those applications better for the people managing them. I would work on skills like, at the time, I was spending time on Angular learning stuff. So learning things that weren't a part of my job necessarily, but they were still being productive. And if you want to do that while not necessarily working outside of your job, you can find something that's related. So again, I'd finished working on my Drupal and WordPress sites early, so I decided to make my own personal checklist for deploying a website. And so I did so in a language I was not familiar with at the time, a framework, Angular. So I picked up Angular. I got to learn something new. I was still doing something relevant, and then I'd have something to show off to my bosses that say, hey, I'm taking this seriously because I made myself a checklist.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing with the ongoing treadmill of work. You finish it, you do a good job, you're going to get more, right? And you get into the cycle of like more. And like you said, you're rewarded for being fast and efficient and doing good work with more work that is sort of expected to be done. So I think it's really important that you keep stats on like what you're doing so that you can come back and say, look, this is the stuff that I've done in the last month, and I need a second to do a few things. First of all, I'm going to burn out if I stay on this constant treadmill and this constant pace. And that's not good for anybody's productivity. And second, you need to make it clear that like we need, as developers, we need time to be able to research these things and to be able to play with new technology. It's important both for me as a developer so that I continue to grow and stay interested in this stuff. It's also important for the code quality of all the stuff that we're building, that I'm constantly researching and trying out new stuff. So quite honestly, I think that you just need to be very clear with manager and your team being like, look, yes, I'm fast. I feel like I'm getting the stuff done faster than it's expected to be. I don't want that to mean that we should shorten our timelines. I want it to mean that I have time to continue to explore and to work on these, continuing my skills. And that's very important for me, that I become a better developer and do not burn out. And I think that's your best way forward. Obviously, not every company is going to want that. They're just going to want you to keep churning out cogs. But I think at that point, if you're really that good of a developer, you can likely start to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can really present a good case to be rewarded for your speedy good work rather than having it be, like you said, rewarded with more work, but rewarded with the ability to do the types of things that are actually engaging.
Next question we have here from Steven. Y'all really got me with the April Fool's episode. I was out for a first run in a long time trying to fool myself into being fit, and I had to stop and check that I haven't put on the first ever episode syntax by accident. I smiled and laughed. So we actually haven't even talked about the April Fool's episode that we have done. We did an April Fool's episode where we talked about like 2005 to 2007 era technology, lots of jQuery, lots of Ruby on Rails, things like that. And we heard the most hilarious feedback of a bunch of people who got like 7 or 8 minutes in, and we're like, what the hell is going on here?
What are they talking about?
Yeah, what are you talking about? A couple people, unfortunately, somebody said, I have a colleague from Japan who's nervous about going to a conference in the US. And I told him to listen to Syntax to sort of get comfortable with the English, talking about web development. And that's actually something we hear. That's a bit of an aside, but that's something we hear quite a bit. We're fairly large in South Korea just because people, when they're learning English, they do things like listen to technology podcasts because unfortunately we're teaching them how to speak English. But unfortunately, they were very confused. So apologies to them. But that was a really fun episode to do. And a lot of people just liked listening to it just for the memories of how things used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make too. Holy cow. I think that was... I had a lot of fun just trying to pretend like it was real. Yeah. I know we both lived through that era of things as professionals. So like I had to put myself in the shoes of Scott, who was working at that time, like what I would have had conversations about. So it was a lot of fun. Next question is from Said Yeater. Hey, first, I listened to your content with pleasure, so thank you. I don't know, did you answer before, but here is my question. Have you tried to teach programming to your wife or kids? If so, what was your experience? What do you suggest? I have tried to teach JS to my wife first, but I found it hard to explain sometimes because of so much inconsistency. I decided to go with .NET C# because I feel like it's more consistent. The written rules, the things a compiler interpreter cares about. Not abstract things like naming or project structure. So far, so good, but I want to hear your experiences. So I've not tried to teach my wife programming. She knows the words TypeScript, Node.js, CSS, HTML, all that stuff, but she does not care, and I don't blame her for that. That is not something that she's super interested in overall. So I have not tried to teach my wife programming. I think I could, but I don't think she cares, and that's fine. I have tried to teach my son some things, but more of an less like what you're saying to do, less teaching syntax and more abstract things, more conceptual things, loops, variables, those types of things. And he's kind of learned that through a number of different things. We had some company send me a robot that you could build and program with Scratch on an iPad with back when I was doing level up tutorials. And that actually worked really well for Landon, because there's really nothing greater than having that feedback loop of having a little robot, and then you in Scratch you can drag like move forward 3 times, and you can see this thing in your house move forward 3 times. So for me, the way that I've been approaching this, granted my son is 7 years old, so well, he's 6, he'll be 7 probably by the time this episode comes out, and no, actually he won't be. Let's see. No, he'll be just turning 7. So basically a 7-year-old. Another thing that we really like is CodeSpark is an app for, I know it's for the iPad at least. I'm sure it's for Android as well. CodeSpark has a lot of really great programming-like games, to the point where my son is playing these things without necessarily really even understanding that he's doing programming. He tells me, "Dad, I'm building games. I've built a game. The game does this. I've built this game." But he's also completing games and projects using loops and variables and those types of things. So he's not quite into the programming of things, but he's into the concepts of what it actually takes to, either build a game or understand general computer programming concepts.
Yeah, I've taught my little nephew, I guess he's probably 13 now, and he's been fairly interested in this type of stuff. In fact, I sent him all the swag and whatnot. Maybe we should get him on at some point just to ask him like questions about programming from somebody who's 13, just to understand where their head is at. And I haven't really focused too much on what the language is and best practices and code structure and all that stuff, because honestly, when people are learning to program, they do not care about doing it the right way. They care so much about just getting the thing that they're trying to build to actually work. And however you can sort of get to that point is the best point, because you're actually getting stuff done. So we had built this app called Get Money at one point. He came over for Christmas. We sat at my desk and we just built an application. I was like, all right, what do you want to build? And I sat on the computer and I was doing the typing, and he just sort of had the ideas. And the game that we actually ended up building was where you start with a bunch of, I think you start with like $10, and then we start with a few things that you can buy or sell. And when you buy and sell things, the prices of the items are variable, meaning that at a lowest, it could be $4. At a highest, it could be $8, right? And the idea with the game is that you're trying to buy and sell things so that your bank account goes up, right? And a lot of it is luck-based, because it's random. It's math.random if you're going to buy it for 4 and sell it for 6, or the opposite. But he thought that was pretty cool because it showed him how to randomize values, how to make things flexible. And then we also did the whole idea of like, he wanted to add like a secret button where you get $1 million, right? So I showed him how we would get a button, put it on the page, add an event listener to it, and then we use some CSS to make an explosion of emojis on the page, or hide the button that is for $1 million. And he had all these like ideas of different use cases. And then like about a year later, he came back and he's showing me the stuff that he's working on in school with the Scratch. And it was really interesting because, again, like, he doesn't care about best practices, but he did come to me with a problem where he would make a function for every single amount of money. Like he made a function called get $5, and then he made another function called get $6. And then he wired up every function to different buttons. And I was like, hey, like, doesn't that seem like a lot of work having to create a new function for every single time? And then if you want to change how it works, you got to update all of them. He's like, yeah, like that's kind of annoying, because then I I get into all these. I'm like, this is where you get into arguments, like you could pass the amount of money to the argument and have one function to do it. And like, to me, that's honestly the best way about this is the guy just wants to make an app that does what it is he's trying to do. And as you hit the issues in programming, that's when you introduce the concepts of, this is a good use case for arguments. This is a good use case for CSS scale. This is a good use case for rotate, rather than like, here's the concepts and then try to implement it. So
yeah, always start with the motivation for sure.
Yeah. And I think JavaScript's the best because you're going to be able to make things that run anywhere. You can send it to your friends. We deploy the thing. It's an app on his iPad. It's in the dock. Whereas like other languages, you're not going to have that like 0 to building something fun nearly as quickly.
You heard it here first. The guy on the JavaScript-based podcast who releases JavaScript courses says that JavaScript is the thing to use. No, I agree. Yeah, it is the best.
Hey, I'd have a .NET course if I believed otherwise.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Next question from Philosaurus. With React swing into server components as the default, are they making the assumption that the server is using a JS runtime? Does this mean that apps where backends are in Java, Go, C#, .NET, or any non-JS languages are sort of out of luck? Kind of, but kind of not. So the way that we've seen server components so far is with meta frameworks like Next.js, right? And the idea there is that, you have your backend components, you have your front end stuff where you opt in to use client. And at some point, yes, they both do need to be done in JavaScript because of the way that server components work. They're rendered on the server. They can fetch data on the server. They can do whatever it is that they want on the server, and then they just stream the component output to the client, and they're able to embed that into your application. So in that regards, yes, that part does need to be. So like what about poor folks that are writing a backend in any other language out there, right? So I'll say that I don't know just yet, and I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff, but here are some of my thoughts. Templating, of course, needs to be done in JavaScript. However, a lot of the logic, a lot of your database queries, a lot of your interfacing with your actual application logic, that doesn't have to happen in a React-specific way. Mm-hmm. It is much easier when it is in JavaScript because you can simply just import and export them. However, there are other ways that you can sort of bridge between those two things, right? We're starting to see like people who run Ruby or PHP applications, very common for them to use some sort of embedded JavaScript runtime to be able to server render the application. And the way that works is they simply are just passing in the data to that function so that it will render. Now, with React Server Components, we're often going the opposite way as well, where your server action needs to then pass data to something else, right? Maybe you need to pass some form data to a database updater function. And if that database updater function is not in JavaScript, what do you do, right? You would have to hit it with an API. Maybe you could use WASM stuff in that area. Maybe you could have an RPC where you can call your PHP functions from your JavaScript. I think we'll start to see some bridges in that regard. A GraphQL API is probably another good use case, but it's certainly like the benefit of React Server Components is that you can simply just do it all in one go. It, of course, gets a little bit more complicated, but people that have backends in different languages are often already have an API or RPC in place so that you can interact with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so wild because it does feel like this stuff still is so mysterious in those regards. Yes, this is the happy path right now, but I'm sure we'll see different things when more people adopt it.
I'll say this. We just got back from React Miami, and there was, I think, 2 talks. One talk on the first day, and then one talk on the second day from Mux about React Server Components. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, I kind of was hoping there would be a bit more on React Server Components. And I talked to everybody saying like, hey, like, what's your use case? And a lot of people are still at the spot where I'm just kind of sitting and waiting to see how this pans out. Even though it's been out for a year already, we're still trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. And a lot of people are saying, you know what I've got going right now works just fine. I'm not going to dip into it until there's like very clear established patterns, or I'm not going to do it until Remix figures it out and it's way easier.
Yeah, no kidding. Cool. Next one is from Intro Man. Intro Man says, just curious what happened to the musical intro and outro to the podcast. Those were an integral part of it. My son used to be able to repeat the intro for the Monday Hasty Treats. Feels really weird without them. Yeah, it's so funny how many folks have expressed this to us.
Yeah.
We intentionally stopped the intro music on our part because, after 782 episodes or whatever it was when we stopped it, it just felt a bit long.
It was annoying
in the tooth.
Yeah.
It was annoying to us personally, not like we felt like it was annoying to you all. But I think it was like, all right, we've heard this so much. I think it is time for something new. So I think, one thing that we do want to say is that there will be new music and intros. We are kind of getting rolling. We just decided to pull it when we went to video, and we're like, all right, we'll figure it out later. So we're in the figuring it out later stage. However, I will say we are looking for bumpers for Hasty Treat, Tasty Treat, Supper Club,
Sick
Shameless
Pick.
Plug, Sick Pick, even Potluck. We're looking for bumpers or little audio snippets, short things. We know a good amount of you are audio folks. A good amount of us are audio folks. Hey, I released several albums. Randy's got some albums. CJ does music. So we'll be making some ourselves. I would love to hear a West song as well. But we'll be making some ourselves. If there is a chance that you wanted to make us a bumper for anything I just mentioned, if we pick it, if it's good, we'll shoot you a coupon code for a t-shirt or something. So, and obviously we'll shout you out on the show. So yeah, if you want to do that, please go ahead. Nothing official here, but I guess we can make it semi-official that we're looking for this type of stuff, and we'll also be doing some on our own. So there will be new bumpers. We're going to have some fun ones. We have some fun ideas. I think if we wanted to just do it with AI, we would have done it already, but I think we want real people doing it. So
yeah. The other thing about the bumpers is, now that a lot of people are moving to Spotify does a great job at surfacing our content to people who have never heard it before. And if the first thing you do when you're checking out a podcast is hear,
listen up, losers.
If you don't understand that it's like a joke and it's kind of funny, we can see in the stats, a lot of people immediately turned it off because they think this is so stupid. Like I'm not into this type of thing. And we didn't even get a chance to be like, we actually do know what we're talking about here. So that's also something to consider as well, the immediate turn off factor of a podcast.
Yeah, when you do it to be like funny cringe, it's funny, but then like when you actually start really cringing at it because of how old it's been, then that's probably time.
Next question we got here from Anon. A lot of what I do is refactor older sites and clean up code and making it more accessible. When budget season rolls around and executive leadership is asking what I do, how can I better quantify my work without being too technical? Saying things like the site feels better, doesn't really work. Lighthouse doesn't measure keyboard accessibility or understandable screen reader text, and saying reducing code by thousands of lines isn't going to mean much. That's a good point. Like often you have to back up all of the hard work that you've done. And I'm sure back-end developers have this problem as well, is that refactoring a large code base and improving things so that it's easier for devs to work on, it's more accessible, it's probably a little bit faster. If that doesn't translate to things that the people working on the budget really understand, then it's kind of hard to make a good use case for that type of thing. So what do you do with this type of thing? So
yeah, one of the first things that came to mind for me was, you're trying to sell the idea of what you're doing as being important with, again, not a lot of quantifiable ways of having that known that it's important. But I think the big thing for me is that people do not understand the value of your work. You have to kind of understand what would they see value in your work and then use that to your advantage. For instance, everybody does not want to be sued. Okay? Nobody wants to be sued. That's not a thing. So if you don't want to be sued, your business doesn't want to be sued, then if your boss or somebody is wondering what you're spending time on, we can get into things like, have you seen the Domino's lawsuit? Domino's was sued for having bad accessibility in one of their apps. And there's lots of stories like that. So if you're trying to sell the idea of accessibility work to somebody who's above you, you can point to the fact that you are preventing legal action against your company by making your application more accessible to users. And I think that's an important thing. Like I said, there's lots of articles about those lawsuits, and you can always point them to those lawsuits to say, hey, I'm protecting us from these following threats, and I'm doing so in these ways. Hey, I made this more accessible in these ways. I made this more accessible in these ways. I knocked this out. I knocked that out. And I did so to prevent us from having any sort of legal action, but also increasing customer goodwill.
Yeah, I think also what's important is like storing your successes when you fix something that people have been complaining about, log it, right? Because often I find myself being like, like what did I do? Or like, what was the benefit of this type of thing? But like you can often find, whether that's customer tickets, whether that's an angry tweet, something like that. If you can find those instances and follow up with those people and being like, hey, it's fixed. Like, what do you think? You can often get like, thank you so much. Like, this has been bugging me forever. And often, like, I didn't really realize this until like we joined Sentry and started like going in the Slack. But like, anytime somebody like tweets something out about a company, you better bet that's making it into the Slack room, you know?
Totally.
Like, and often like I'll tweet something and like 10 minutes later, somebody from that company is like, hey, we're working on it. You know, like that type of stuff is being watched so much more than I thought. And if you can sort of like keep those on log, and when you fix something, follow up with that person and say, hey, like look at these customers who were frustrated with the product, especially like customers that care that much want to love your product or want to love the website. So if you can follow up and say, hey, I fixed that, or even other developers, you know, like, man, thanks so much for refactoring the way that we add blocks to this type of thing. It was so painful before, and now it's so easy to add new content to the website. So just keep a log of ways that you've made other people happy and ways that you've improved the website, because if you have 6 or 7 of those things under your belt, you can just very clearly say, hey, this is what I've done.
Yeah. And this is I don't know how a lot of companies handle this, but one of the things Sentry does is they have like an internal blog where it's like you get to brag about the stuff that you did. And I do think that works really well, because you could throw together a blog post that would say, hey, this is what I'm protecting us from, or this is what I'm working on right now. But I do think, like Wes said, documenting it in tickets is a really surefire way to say, hey, I closed this many PRs, or I merged this many PRs, I closed this many GitHub issues, I did this and that. And I think that's a good quantifiable way.
Yeah.
Next.
Also, like, sorry, one more thing about this is like Lighthouse doesn't measure keyboard accessibility. You certainly can run the Axe dev tools and show them, hey, we have 787 issues. Like that's maybe a bit of a hack. Is often like you'll have 600 like color contrast issues pop up, and you can fix those with one line of CSS, and then like play the same game. Fix 600 accessibility issues with text through the website. Cleaned up 17 keyboard traps with a escape handler, or moving over to popover. Like I keep the stats behind the stuff that you actually do. The Axe dev tools are great for specifically accessibility measurements.
And to even go further into that, Wes, you can use the Axe linter accessibility tools in a GitHub action to have that even, outputting into your GitHub pipeline itself. So there, you can integrate it into your workflow as well. Next question from Shabazz. For developers interested in creating and selling their own course, do you suggest developing a personalized website and course platform, or utilizing an existing course platform such as Udemy? What are the pros and cons of each approach? Udemy sucks. It's a race to the bottom. Yes, some people have make a lot of money off of Udemy. Most people won't. Udemy leadership is bad. They I'm just going off here. They don't try to limit stolen courses. People have stolen my courses and just re-uploaded them and sold them when they're available for free. So I would personally not do Udemy. That said, I know a lot of people who it's a really low barrier way to do it. That said, I do think when you're going to be selling a course, you need to focus on building the audience before you worry about building the course and selling the course. Because if you sell on Udemy, or you sell on your own platform, or you sell on anything, right? You're not going to sell any copies of it, even if it's on Udemy, if you don't have the audience ready to buy. Just simply publishing it on Udemy just because it's a marketplace will not get you sales. And for the most part, you're going to be a race to the bottom where you're having to do crazy sales on your course just to get people to buy it or to notice it. So I would first, before you do anything, I would focus on building the course itself, building up a user base of people who know and trust your work, people who would want to buy a course from you, and people who have gotten a preview into what the course may be like. You can do this through, like Wes had a newsletter where he got people to subscribe to his newsletter by giving away a free course to get into the newsletter or resources. You could go to YouTube and start to build your audience on YouTube that way, or Twitch or any of these things. But I think before you even get into this conversation, I think you need to build that audience. I built my own platform. It was hard. It was a pain in the butt. If you're doing subscriptions, if you're just doing individual sales, you can use something quick and easy like Lemon Squeezy. What's the other one that's like Lemon Squeezy? Do you, a lot of people use Gumroad?
Yeah, what is it?
Gumroad? Yeah.
Yeah, Gumroad, yeah.
Yeah. Gumroad, those types of things.
Paddle is another big one.
Make it really easy to sell a course. And that to me seems like a good way to do it. You build a little mini site, you put up a service in front of it, and you don't get too crazy complex with it. But then you don't have to be limited to Udemy taking a cut, it being presented with all of Udemy's other trash courses, or having to deal with giving that company any money. So, yeah.
The benefit of going with a marketplace with something like Udemy or I think Kajabi, Teachable, there's like a million of them out there, is that, yeah, sometimes there's going to be an existing audience there, and sometimes you can get in front of those people, but it really doesn't work all that good. You see plenty of people on Udemy with 0 sales on their courses because people just don't know who they are, right? Like there's not that type of thing. And if you look at like the top creators on Udemy, they're all people that you would know from outside of Udemy as well, right? They're all people that are on YouTube or have books or have a popular blog website, things like that. So I would say, again, yeah, probably work on your audience first. That's going to be the hardest part of building it, but also don't create your entire course platform from scratch, because that is I've done it. I've been working on mine for over 10 years now.
Yeah.
It's a ton of work. There's lots to it, and you can often get away with just sort of doing something in between the two of those, and you can kind of just chip away at that type of stuff. So also, in terms of like pros and cons, another reason why people will go with either a course platform that is out there ready, or something like a Lemon Squeezy, which is just it's the payment processing aspect to it, but you can sort of get by with that and then adding a little website yourself on top of it. The reason why a lot of people like going that route is because they handle a lot of the taxes for you. They are what's called like I think it's like the vendor on record or something like that, where you're not actually selling it to the end customer. The Lemon Squeezy is selling it to your user at the end of the day. And because of that, you do not have to be worried about local tax rates and do I need to charge VAT if I'm not in Europe, and how does that work? And there's like, I have to pay a lawyer to answer all of these questions for me, it's pretty complex. So there is a massive pro to that type of thing. So I would probably say, like Scott said, find something in the a middle ground. And if you think that you are getting a little bit of momentum, if you think you want to do this a bit more, then you start to get into a spot where you can say, okay, first of all, I'm paying hundreds of dollars a month for this course platform. Even if I sell it or don't, I can get rid of that cost. Second of all, these companies are taking a pretty sizable chunk. Like, just do the numbers. Depends on how much you're selling. Like, what's a 5% cut of 20 courses? Not that much. What's a 5% cut of 10,000 courses? That's very significant, right? You got to think about that as well. But those are always things that you can sort of just escape from. And don't get too hung up on the whole process of making your own course platform, because that in itself is a full-time job.
I can sincerely say, do not try to write a subscription platform with Braintree. That will take you the rest of your life. So have fun.
Jason asks, how do you effectively navigate and maintain professional growth in a workplace that consistently undermines your coding abilities with criticism, yet paradoxically, demands that you take full responsibility for your work? How do you foster resilience and confidence in your skills amidst these challenging dynamics? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I almost always work by myself. I just do everything on my own. I'm fairly tough-skinned when it comes to criticism and feedback. That has sort of grown as I have proven myself. I'm able to build stuff that I'm proud of. I'm able to make a living for my type of things. And being in the industry long enough, you realize, like, no, these often people that are very aggressive in criticism really don't know what they're talking about, or they feel like being very critical is what makes them look like a better developer. So I don't know. Scott, any ideas here?
Yeah, we should have Courtney come on to talk about some of this stuff, because she's really good at identifying insecurity in folks, which is like very funny. One time we were in a car ride and one of my crewmates was like talking about all these girls that were into him, and we're in a car full of breakdancers, and Courtney just looks at him and she says, "You're just saying this because you're insecure about this following things." And the car went silent, and everybody was just like, and
total wreck.
Nailed him dead to just completely got him. And next thing you know, he was dating a girl then for like 2+ years after that. It just totally shattered his like, hey, I'm a player kind of mindset. Just with that, hey, you're insecure. It was very funny. And so when I tend to look at things like this, I tend to go right to that angle, right? If people are criticizing you too much or trying to undermine your confidence, a lot of it is insecurity about their own abilities or skills. And, one thing that developers tend to do a lot of times is that they really tend to want to act like they're very smart all the time. They want to say, I'm so great, I'm the best, I'm so smart, look at me, I'm so smart. And you can't take that as being anything other than those people being insecure and potentially, just trying to bring you down for no reason other than their own insecurity. So if you're feeling like a pinch because of that, like, shoot, I'm not feeling good enough because I'm constantly getting cut down, I think one thing that you can try to do, it's hard to just say grow a thicker skin, because I'm a sensitive ass person. I do not like that kind of thing. So I think some of it is you need to look at it for what it is. These people are either insecure about their own work, or they're trying to help you and they don't know how to do it accurately. But you can't look at it as like, I'm doing the wrong thing, I am bad, I'm having a problem. You need to look at it maybe more of an external angle. So how can you foster resilience? I would say you need to look at it as being more of an external thing and less about you and more about them. And just be confident in your skills and your abilities. You got the job. The only thing that really matters is if your boss or your clients are happy with the work at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think also, like, put it back on them. Hey, thanks for your feedback. Can you help me with this? Or give them feedback right back. You made me feel bad when you said it that way. Certainly in my marriage and in several work relationships, I've had that over the years where, oh yeah, I'm a fairly straight shooter, right? And even working with people from different cultures, right? Like the Dutch. I'm Dutch. The Dutch are extremely, extremely to the point and are extremely like my Oma would, when I would visit her, she would be like, "You look like you've gained weight," like just straight up, like boom, like just kill me, please, and like that for them is not a rude thing to say. It's just they just are very straight with their type of thing. So communicate with them. You make me feel bad when you said that. Can you help me with this? I'd love to get better with this type of thing, and I think that'll really help.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. But I mean, even like you said, bringing the feelings into it. Hey, man, when you said that my JavaScript sucked, hey, it made me feel really incompetent. Like, do you think that you could not do that? I do think that that's a legit way to bring that up, because, man, somebody can't invalidate your feelings. If you feel a certain way about something, that's totally valid. Next question from Dan. Dan, you're killing me here. Dan, how would you say this, Wes?
Chonier.
Dan Chonier. Sorry, Wes is better with some names like this sometimes.
Oh, hold on. Is that a French name? It is. Chonier.
Okay. Dan Chonier. Oh, Dan, right. I hope that is correct. Sorry about this, Dan. Would love an episode on crossing over from web dev to mobile dev. I know this isn't exactly your guys' thing, but tools like Tamagui, which help you create both a native and a web version of your app, seems like a super cool way to get started in native dev. So Dan, I've done a bit of native dev through React Native. We did talk about Tamagui with Nate on this show. You can go find that at syntax.fm/601. It's a cool tool. We also talked quite a bit about React Native Web, which on the surface seems like a project for nobody, but it's actually really, really cool. And that conversation changed my mind on React Native Web. But either way, what I have found in this space is that it's really hard, no matter what, to create a write once, deploy everywhere app. And for the most part, you probably aren't going to get that. So I would focus on creating the native app as it is, as a native app. And you can do that with React Native. React Native outputs real native code. It's not a web app in a wrapper. Or if you don't want to learn the native things, you can always output a web app in a wrapper. The new version of Tori does it. There's lots of platforms that do it, and they do it really well. In fact, the mail client that Wes and I used for a long time, Missive, is a web app, and you would never know that, because it's really, really super good. So you can do a web tech app as a native app with a web view. You can do a React Native, which is a real native web app. I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend getting into Swift unless you're planning on doing that full time. It's a whole different world. I've dipped my toes in there a little bit, and it will take you a bit of a path away from web tech. So if you want to enhance your web tech skills, I would use React Native. If you were doing a native app, I would use any of the capacitor or any of those wrappers around a web UI. If you just want to keep it straight web tech.
I met Naman at React Miami, and he's the dev and creator of StyleX, which is Facebook's styling platform. And it looks like it's not right now, but one of the end goals for StyleX is to also be able to translate those cross-platform. So there's quite a bit of stuff in there. And we have a show coming up with the folks from the React Native podcast. We're going to do sort of a collab with them, because there's a lot of questions I have around like how React Native works and building real applications in React Native. Yeah. So the styling is certainly one of them. Like didn't React Native build their entire style engine? Like you kind of use CSS. It's CSS.
Like Flexbox-esque.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What's that called?
And everything needs to be kind of a Flex container. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I did a course. I did a couple of courses on React Native in my day, and I'd be interested when we have them on to like really learn how it's changed and how it's evolved, because I know there's a lot of different initiatives to either make it faster or more reliable. My experience with React Native is once you get it working, you don't touch a single version of anything. You don't touch any of those versions because you may never get it working again.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space. Even like we asked Stripe, and I also talked to a guy at the party from Turo, and like every single
Turo.
person I talked to, I was just like, "What's your component system look like? And what's your translating to native look like?" And a lot of people I talked to, they said, "We built our own component system, but now we're starting to integrate some of these libraries into it, so we don't have to maintain all the accessibility stuff ourselves." And they often said, "Yeah, we have two separate teams for native and web, and we try to make them look as close as possible without doing that type of thing." So, yeah, more content on that coming up.
Yeah, I know. I've been deep in this space, Wes, because I wanted to get a Tory mobile app for my habit tracker. And then I'm just like looking at it and like, oh, there's so much of this app that I cannot just dump into a WebView native app. I have to worry about the server now that I have server-side rendering and all sorts of stuff. Actually, that's a funny area where client-side rendering apps have a huge leg up because it's a lot easier.
Next question and the last question we have here from Chatty Petite. Wes mentions Cloudflare almost every episode, but even going back after listening to episode 691, Cloudflare workers are next level, I still don't really know what it is. When I go to their website, you see jargon like R2, object stores, workers, key value, durable objects, D1, hyperdrive, and I can't really tell what it is. Wes uses worker for everything, but what is a worker? Can I deploy an Next.js app on Cloudflare? Can a worker run Node Express APIs? What are the pros and cons of serverless API? How do I create full stack app on Cloudflare?
All these questions.
Awesome. That's such a good, we need to do an entire episode just on like, what the hell is Cloudflare? Because we've done lots of episodes surrounding them, but I don't know that we've done a full explainer on it. But I'll answer like it from a high level right now is that Cloudflare workers are functions that basically, I can say function. Cloudflare workers is the ability to run a JavaScript application. And Cloudflare workers are very similar to serverless functions in that they spin up, run their code, and spin down. The downsides to it is Cloudflare has their own JavaScript runtime, which they are working very closely to getting Node.js, all of the Node.js APIs supported. They're pretty close in that type of thing. There are some other downsides to how long they can run, how much memory you're allowed, things like that. So that's their like kind of their hosting, if you will, right? Like they have workers. Then Cloudflare also has a CDN, which is great for hosting static files, images, HTML files, things like that. And then Cloudflare also has R2, which is their what do you call that? It's their Amazon
S3, their data storage.
Yeah. It basically they call it object storage, and that's a fancy way to say files, right? You can put anything you want in there. Most likely you're going to be putting images and zip files to download and saving parts of a streaming recording you might want to put in there, right? Anything you want to be able to put in there, you can. Then they also have a couple like database projects out there, which is Cloudflare D1 is a SQLite like database. It's amazing. You can literally roll the database back to any second. Like if you need to scrub back, you can. They have key value stores as well. And a lot of that's built on this thing called durable objects. I'm not going to go into too much about what that is because it's sort of like a lower level primitive. But you can kind of think of Cloudflare as, in reality, Cloudflare, of course, is like a DDoS protection, but in reality, they're sort of an AWS competitor in that they will give you the pieces of the infrastructure and you can piece them all. You can use part of it or all of it, and you can piece it together to make a really nice and fast application. It's often very fast. It's often very cheap. And there's often a lot of little but caveats that sort of come along with it, where you got to do things in the Cloudflare specific way.
I tend to host a lot of things on Pages using the adapter patterns. You just toss in an adapter for Pages or for Cloudflare in general with SvelteKit, and I've never had any hiccups hosting anything there. So Pages can be super fast and easy to deploy a Vercel-like experience.
Yeah, and Pages is a product that it does build for you, right? Like Vercel would do. It does CDN.
Yep.
It does like static file hosting, but also does like workers. If you want to be able to run backend code. So it sort of like combines them all into one. Pages and workers are kind of a bit weird because there is Cloudflare workers, and then there's pages that can also have workers in them. And then there's this idea of bindings, which is making the database available to your pages or to your workers. So it's all a little bit confusing. I feel like Cloudflare hasn't done a amazing job at making it like effortless. Every time I use it, it's just like, man, this is awesome. But
Works, yeah.
I find myself in the chat room asking a bunch of questions. And I have deployed Next.js on Cloudflare. It works really well. I'm a big fan of it. So yeah, we'll do some more episodes on that.
Yeah, we'll do a deep dive because even that, Wes, I'm sorry, was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's sure there's
yeah.
a ton.
At the very most simple, it can be a CDN for you. At any more, it can be an infrastructure for your entire stack from data to your application itself. I register all my domains there now. I host all my domains there and use it for DNS. So a lot of that stuff as well. So that brings us to the end of the show. Now it's time for sick picks. Insert sick pick bumper here. Sick pick. There we go. And I have a sick pick for us today, which is Folex. Have you ever used Folex, Wes?
No.
It's
Sounds like a dandruff shampoo.
It's a carpet cleaner, and it's cheap. It's like $6 or something, and for a big old squeeze bottle of it. And I don't necessarily know what's in this. I'm sure you could probably figure it out relatively soon. But we have like wool carpet, so you have to be very careful with what you put on carpet. And we have dogs, we have kids. Carpet gets stained for sure. So this Folex stuff is really great. It's a really great little cheap solution that's been around a long time, and it's kind of like an OxyClean like carpet remover, stain remover, any of that stuff, cleaner. And you just spray it on anytime there's any issues. And we got to rely on this stuff like crazy for how much dogs bring in mud into the carpet. This is the worst part about our house, Wes, is that the entrance. So the way a lot of Denver houses work is that you have your garage in the alleyway that's not attached to your house. And so our garage is detached from our house. And then the entranceway into our actual house from the garage is carpeted. So you come in from outside or from the garage or anything, and the first thing you have to do is walk on carpet. Now, granted, we have a rug there, but that carpet gets really nasty. So we use this Folex stuff. It works really well.
Oh, man. And you're from Michigan, so you take your shoes off in the house, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
That's a weird...
blows my mind that there's like a section of this United States that wear their shoes inside.
That makes no sense to me. You want to bring in your shoes are so nasty. You want to bring that stuff into the house?
And it's so funny because at like parties in university, you would go to somebody's house for a party, and often there would be people there that were from the States, like going to university in Canada. And the first thing you do at a party is you take your shoes off, right? Yeah. And then you're just hanging out with a bunch of people in your socks, which is completely normal to us, but I see how that could be weird.
Yeah, it's not normal to do it other ways. In fact, every time I go to a party anywhere, I'm like, what do I do with my shoes? I got like looking at how many shoes have been taken off. I tend to take them off anyways, just because it makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, SSS tributyl phosphorate is what's in this stuff.
Okay.
It sounds scary, but like all chemicals hydrogen sounds scary,
It works, and it's gentle enough for wool carpet, so that means it's
water-based,
gentle enough for, yeah.
I'm going to sick pick the CalDigit TS4 dock. So I had been running the TS3 Plus Thunderbolt dock for many, many years, and I've been very happy with it. And one thing I didn't like about it is that the Thunderbolt cables are extremely, extremely expensive, and they must be. It's a specific type of Thunderbolt cable that can handle 40 gigabits a second, and I think it's like 100 watts or something. And it broke. Like I've replaced it like 6 or 7 times, and they're like $100 a cable. I had spent a couple times on them, and I was just like tweeting like, "Is there any better Thunderbolt cable that doesn't break on you?" And like a lot of people are like, just buy this $10 Amazon one. And that's the frustrating thing about USB-C is that people think it's got the same ends, it's going to work. It's unfortunately not the same thing. But CalDigit was like, yeah, we'll hook you up. And then they sent me the TS4 dock, which is even better because it does a couple things. First of all, it has high amperage output USB, which this camera I'm on right now needs I don't know what it is, but it needs like, in order to charge over USB, it needs like a high output to charge fast. Otherwise, it drains the battery faster than it can replenish itself. And the USB ports on this thing, I think 3 or 4 of them output higher charging rates than you normally get out of a typical USB port, which is amazing. And it also, they stay charging when you unplug your laptop from the dock, which is amazing. Like often I'll be like, oh, I'm going to charge my headphones, right? And then you unplug. If you unplug your computer because you're leaving for the day, you still want your headphones to charge, right? So it's smart enough to realize, oh, well, I'm not plugged in, but I still am gonna do power. And then it also has 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is awesome. So the old one was a single gigabit Ethernet, and that was fine for me because my internet doesn't go any faster than that. But sending data to my NAS, like offloading video files, the 45 minutes of this camera recording the React Miami podcast we did was 27 gigs.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not putting this thing on my laptop. I threw it on my NAS. And I was like, this is fast, man.
So question for you.
Yeah?
Do you connect directly to your NAS with Ethernet?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And how do you connect to the internet with Ethernet as well then?
Oh,
you
no.
swapping
So
cables?
the way that, no, sorry, I don't connect from my laptop to the NAS.
The NAS is on the network via Ethernet.
Yeah. My NAS is on the network, and as is my my computer, and then they can talk to each other going through that. And that's the other thing as well, is that even if the NAS, like a lot of NAS only have like a 1 gigabit NIC in them, but I was trying to upload the file to Google Drive and upload the file to my NAS. But both of those, even though my internet is at 1 gigabit, I could upload them concurrently because I'm now have 2.5 gigabit, which was really cool. So even if your internet doesn't go that fast, right? I have 50 megabit upload, so I wasn't doing that, but you can really max out some of them. So I'm a big fan of this TS4 dock. Check it out if you're looking for one. It's a really weird world of docks. And does this work as well as you think it would? And does it do everything I want? And the CalDigit ones have been the best that I've found over the years.
Yeah, I love my TS3, but now I'm feeling like a bit of a chump for not having the TS4. That's one more number. Yeah,
it's one more. And it also has more USB ports, which is like, I got rid of all but one of my items that I had to put into a powered hub, because I was running a USB hub off of the dock just because like the old one only had like 4 or 5 USB, and the new one has, I don't know, more than I need, which is awesome.
I bet Courtney could use a TS3.
There you go.
That's how I justify things. All right, shameless plugs. I'm going to shamelessly plug the Syntax YouTube channel. That's right, we're on YouTube. We are showing code. We're showing our screens. We're having fun. We're on video. Not only that, but we also have CJ there posting a ton of really awesome content lately. He's been getting into self-hosting stuff. So if you're interested in self-hosting, CJ's had so many good videos, and he's been doing office hours, so there might be more live streaming in our future. I'm going to be live streaming very soon here when Svelte 5 is released, and I will be releasing a full course on Svelte 5. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, or just watching the podcast on video, head on over to youtube.com/@syntaxfm, or just look for Syntax on YouTube. We're there.
Beautiful. I'm going to ditto that as well. Check out the YouTube, check out us, wherever you want. It's amazing the amount of people we met at React Miami that were like, hey, yeah, now that you're on video, I'm watching it a lot more than I used to, or I'm loving the clips because I don't I don't commute anymore, but I'm catching all the clips on TikTok. So shout out to everybody who gave us that feedback as well. That's it for today. We will catch you later. Peace.
Later.